Alright, so the basics of modeling. I have a few things set already. In the top left-hand corner, the drop-down menu is set to modeling. I then have the tabs here set to polygon, and under create, I have polygon primitives all the way down, and I have interactive creation turned on. This is going to be off by default. You can tell if it's on or off by the check mark next to the name. Okay. So I'm just going to use these icons here in the tabs. I'm just going to start with a cube. So I'm going to grab the cube icon, which is the second one. It says drag and pull for height. So I'm going to drag and pull. Okay, so by default, the move tool turned on, which is W. Remember, rotate is E and scale is R. But before you actually move anything or scale or rotate, just with primitive objects, always check the creation settings. So those are located in the history of the object. Over here in the channel box, we have, if I click off and click back, we have just the data, right, normal. We have position, rotate, scale. Then we have this shapes section, and then we have inputs. Okay, think of inputs as like history, things that have happened to the object. So the very first thing that's happened is polycube 1. This is like the creation, right? It appeared here. So polycube 1, I'm going to click on that. And then I get these expanded settings. I have width, height, depth, and subdivisions. Okay, so the width is 6.5. I could type in something else like 5. Okay, the depth is 6.2. I could type something like 7. And the height is 2.4 here. I could change that if I wanted to, maybe 5. Now, remember when you change the height, we originally drew this on the grid, and now that I changed it, it's actually going under the grid. So I actually prefer it to sit on the grid. So if you just think about it for a minute, right? The pivot point is the center of the position data. So the center of the object is half the height. So if the height is 5, the translate y position to set this on the grid is going to be half of 5, which is 2.5. So I'm going to go to translate y up here and type in 2.5, which is half of the height. And now it's sitting perfectly on the grid again. Okay? Alright, so subdivisions. I'm going to go back to that input, polycube 1. Subdivisions are how many faces are on each side of the object. So subdivision width, it's 1. I'm going to change that to 2. So on the width side here, which happens to be this side, I now have 2. So what really happened is one edge appeared. So the edges are the green lines, the highlighting. The faces are the flat, larger areas. And vertices are going to be where two edges meet. So these edges here cross. This is a vertex in the center, a point. Okay, so increasing this to 2 really means on the width side of this object, put 2 faces. So I have one over here and one on the right. On the height, going up and down, instead of just one giant face going vertically, maybe I want 3. I'll type in 3 over here. And now I have 3 faces going up. Same on the depth, I could type 3 there as well. And now I have 3 going left to right on this side. Okay. So again, it's not the number of edges that are being added, it's the number of faces resulting from those edges. Now that's a bit much, so I'm going to cut each side down to 2. And you can type in, again, more than one thing at each time. So I'm going to drag from 2 to 3 to 3 and let go. And you see only the last one's highlighted. I'm going to type in 2, enter. They all change to 2. Okay. Now the other thing is maybe you don't know how big you want this, or maybe you don't know how many edges you want, how many faces you need. So here in the history, again, the polycube, you can interactively change it just to see what it would look like instead of typing in values. So to do that, let's just take the width for a minute. So instead of clicking on the number, I'm going to click on the word, width. And then I'm going to bring my mouse here into the viewport in just a gray area. Hold down the middle mouse button without Alt. So I'm not moving right now. I'm just going to click the middle mouse button and hold it down. I get a double-headed arrow. I'm going to drag my mouse back and forth. And that's going to interactively scale the value that's highlighted over in the channel box. This works for anything. So if I wanted to change the position, like translate X, I could click on the word translate X, bring my mouse into the viewport, middle mouse click, and drag, and it will move only in translate X. Okay. Remember, undo is Z. Okay. I could change more than one thing at the same time, so maybe subdivisions, maybe the width, the height, and the depth. I'll grab the words for all three, go into the viewport, middle mouse button, click and drag, and all three will change at the same time. Now this is an extremely dense and high resolution object. Usually you can tell how high something is by zooming out. If it turns solid green, that's not usually a good thing. Okay, so I'm going to bring that back down, again using the middle mouse button. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to leave it at 2. Okay. Now we can edit these points ourselves. So we have vertices, edges, and faces. We can move just those pieces instead of working on the whole object. We're actually in right now object mode, and object mode means we're editing the object as a whole. Okay. We can move the whole object. We can rotate the whole object, so on and so forth. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go and right-click on the object, and you're going to get this marking menu. Again, don't hold Alt. Alt is only for moving and navigating. Okay, I'm going to hold down right mouse button, and I see a few different settings in here, just not letting go of the mouse. I see object mode, which is what we're currently in. So if I were to go to object mode and let go while I'm over object mode, unclick, nothing changes because I'm in the same mode I already am. So I'm going to right-click again. I'm going to go straight up. I have edge. To the left, I have vertex. And then straight down, I have face. Okay, so let's go ahead and do face first. I think it's the easiest to kind of visualize. So straight down to face. You'll see that the highlighting has turned to blue. And if you hover over the object, you're going to get this red selection area. These are faces, so I can click on a different face. So the red area is just showing you where your mouse is right now. So I'm going to click on one of these faces. It gets selected in orange, like this. I can move, rotate, and scale this component. So now we're in component editing, face editing. So I can scale this or rotate it or move it. I'm going to try moving it. So remember, move is W, rotate is E, and scale is R. So W, I'm going to move it up and down. So I'm going to drag this arrow and see how I can distort that now. Okay. You can just click anywhere to unselect your selection, but we're still in face mode. So even though I unselected it, I can go back and I'm still selecting faces. Now if I wanted to select more than one, I can click on one, hold shift, click on a second, and now they're both going to move. Like this. Click it out, and just the space of Maya and deselect. Okay, go 1, 2, hold shift, and move. And I can move different pieces. Now there are some things you want to avoid. If I were to start moving this face and go too far, see how this gets very narrow right here? This edge. It's kind of like collapsing. And you might see some strange shading where the shading gets kind of really dark to light. That's just very extreme. So in general, you want the faces on an object to all be consistent in size and kind of blend into one another in a very kind of nice way, not extreme, because that's going to cause some strange results. Just kind of keep that in mind. We'll get into more of the best practices of modeling as we go. Okay, for now we're just kind of experimenting. Alright, so I can do that. I can also rotate. So with this space selected here, I'm going to hit E for rotate, and I could twist this. But again, I want to watch out what I'm doing. I don't want to twist too far. It's kind of breaking. See how these faces are pointing into each other? Okay, you really want to avoid instances like that. Okay. I can rotate in and around. I'm going to do this for a second and unclick. See how the back side of this face is black? The front side is gray. The back side is black. Okay, so you really only have visual information on the front side of a face. The inside of the object will not be colored. So if we were to pan and go inside this object, like this, you'll notice that it's black. Okay, that's because there's technically no information there. Okay. These faces are infinitely thin. They have no thickness or depth to them. So let's just delete a face to see what happens. I'm going to select this one and hit delete. Okay, I can now see how thin this is. And it looks like, oh, there's something there, but there really isn't. Okay, this is not realistic to the world. So whenever you model something, make sure to get that next level of accuracy and realism, you always need some sort of thickness, which we don't have right now. You can be very careful with that. Same with edges, like up here at this point. It comes to a perfect mathematical point, which isn't really a real world thing. Okay? So you always make sure you want to have enough detail and enough thickness to make it look real. So this perfect sharp edge is not real. Okay? This is just a very basic object right now. So I'm going to undo to put that face back. Z. Okay. Alright, let's try some edges. I'm going to right click on the object again. This time go straight up to edge. This time it's still highlighted blue, but when you drag your mouse around, it's the edges that are going to highlight red. So I'm going to click on one of the edges, and same thing, I can move this edge. Okay. I can rotate this edge. And I can scale this edge. I can scale faces too. I didn't show that, but I can scale it like this. Okay. Vertices are the same. So I'm going to right click, go to Vertex. Now the dots, again the vertices at the crosshairs, turn pink. Okay. You can click on them. The only difference with vertices is that you cannot scale them. The scale tool will be there, but nothing will happen. Okay. You also cannot rotate a vertex. Vertices can only move. Because again, they're a point in space, like a pixel. You can't rotate these points. I'm just going to move it around. Okay, so you can adjust all of these. Just kind of, again, experimenting with it. Okay. Good. You can select more than one. So if I grab one, hold Shift, Shift again, I can grab these three. They turn yellow. It's very easy to accidentally select a vertex on the back side of the object when you're selecting one on the front. Even though you think maybe you off-click by accident and you think you're not clicking anywhere, but you're actually selecting one behind. It's not doing it right now for me, but it's quite a common problem. So before you do anything, just double check that you have what you actually want selected. Okay? Faces too, or edges, it's a very easy and common problem to experience. Okay? Don't think of this model as solid. It's really just a bunch of data right in the computer, so it's very easy for the computer to mistake your intention for selecting something behind, even though to us it looks like there's nothing behind, we're only seeing the front. Okay? Alright, very good. To deselect something, let's say you select too many. So again, selecting more than one is Shift. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I got these guys. If I want to unselect something, it's going to be Control, both on a PC and on a Mac. Okay, so Control, click to deselect that. You can also drag over an area. Let's say I want this entire side. I'm going to navigate over, drag over this area, and I'm going to get all the vertices in that section. Now, again, if I accidentally selected one that I didn't want, like, oops, like this one, hold Control to get rid of it. Now, a good indicator to tell you if you have something selected wrong or not is look at where the Move tool is and hit W. See where it's located right now? It's always going to be centered in your selection. So if I had one over here, see how it moves to the middle? That tells me that it's too far away from my selection. Something must be selected over here, which it is. Control to get rid of it. The Move tool snaps back to roughly the center of my selection. Okay, I can then move. Now you can scale a group of vertices. It will scale the distance between them. You can also rotate a group of vertices. Okay. Very good. So I'm going to go to Object Mode, select this, hit Delete, and next I want to try to actually model something in particular instead of just modeling a random shape. So I'm going to try and make a bowl to get started with, because it's pretty straightforward and simple. I just pulled up a reference picture. Not that you should need a reference picture to make a bowl, but just extremely simple. Okay, so let's go ahead and just start. I mean, it's a very spherical object to begin with, so starting with a sphere sounds good. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the first button here in the polygon section. Drag it out. So there's the start of the bowl. Okay. And again, as I mentioned before, or maybe not, it's good to center everything in the origin when you're ready to actually make something. So I'm going to go over here to the channel box and find the position data, translate XYZ, and put them all to 0. Okay, so now it's perfectly centered in the grid. I do want the bottom of the bowl to rest on the grid, not the top. So the cube, sorry, not the cube, the sphere has a radius of 3.8. Let's just round that off to 3. Okay, and with 3 here, that's the radius. That's half the height or width of this ball. So I'm going to put the height up to the same number. Height and translate y is also 3. That way the bottom is perfectly touching. Now, of course, because it's such a round object, it's the very tip of this object is on the origin, but it is there. Okay. So the first instinct you might have when deciding to make a bowl is well, why don't I just go to face? So I'm going to go right click, bring my mouse down to face, drag select around a large area to get the top half of these faces, and delete them with delete. Like this. Okay, now I'm going to go back to object mode. Remember, whenever you're in component mode, you're going to stay there unless you go back to object. So I'm going to right click, object, and let go. Now I can select the whole bowl. Now this is, not awful, but the problem, as we kind of discussed a minute ago, is that these walls are infinitely thin. They don't really exist. All that exists is the front side. The back side is just black. So, in a perfect world, deleting this would just make it into a bowl, but in reality, we need a little bit more work than that. Also, the problem with this is that it's just the default sphere, and we didn't adjust any settings. It's a little dense. If we zoom out, it has quite a lot of faces that aren't necessary. Too much detail to begin with. It's always better to start with less and then add more yourself later. So I'm going to delete this and try again. So that's one way you could think about it. The second, is to make the sphere again. Drag it out. Again, I'm going to adjust the radius, so maybe I'll do 4 here since I was close to 4. And the height will also be 4, which is, again, that's the radius. So now it's sitting on the grid. I don't want to scale it or rotate it, right? Because if I do that, I can't adjust these axes, the subdivisions. So before I do anything else, I need to decide on how many subdivisions I need. Now, just from a lot of experience, 8 is usually the magic number. So I'm going to grab the text on both of these two names here, axis and height, go into the viewport, use middle mouse to drag down till that number says 8. Okay. Now 8 might seem kind of low compared to what we had with 20. It is, but it's also low enough that we can add more detail and not have to deal with a ton of edges, because a big part of this is going to be editing each edge itself, and the more edges we have, the more work we make for ourselves. So in this case, maybe 8 is a little too low, so I'm going to go up a little higher than usual to 10, I think. Okay, so it has a radius of 4, and then the subdivisions are 10 by 10. And it's on translate y4. Alright, so now I'm going to delete the top half. I don't need it anymore. So I'm going to go to face, drag select over the top half, which are all these faces here. Just make sure you got the right ones. Okay, and then hit delete. So they're gone. We're back to where we were a minute ago, except it's a pretty big difference too, is that this is simpler. There's less edges for us to deal with, but it's still keeping the round shape. And remember, if we go back to object mode, we're going to be switching a lot back and forth, just really get in the habit of right click and know which one's where. So object mode, and if we could click on the object here and do, remember 1 is normal and 3 is smooth. So on 3, if we click off, it's actually a very smooth result, right? It's pretty nice. We don't need those 20 edges, 20 faces, subdivisions to get us going. Okay, we can stay really simple. All right, so to keep moving, The first thing we have to fix is actually the bottom of the bowl. So the bottom, if you notice, everything comes to a point, right? Instead of having four-sided faces down here, we actually have triangles. And we can easily fix that. So I'm actually going to go to the outside of the bowl. It's always easier to work on the gray side rather than the black side. And it also doesn't matter if you want 1 or 3 on for smooth or not smooth. That makes no difference when you're modeling. Okay. So I'm going to look at this bottom of this bowl, and we're not centered on the origin yet, are we? So I'm going to delete some edges to turn these triangles into quads, 4s. So I'm going to right click, go to edge, and so the first thing I'm going to do is just select every other edge around this wheel. So if I delete this one, right, this is going to take 2 triangles and turn it into one 4-sided face. So every other edge, so that one, 2, 3, 4, oops, I'm holding the wrong button. 2, 3, 4, 5. So I'm holding shift as I go around. I'm hit delete. Okay, so now what I have, I go to face, right click, face. I have a 4-sided polygon. Now, when they make a shape like this, that's not like a square, right? This is actually called a kite. Like when you fly kites. It's a particular kind of face. It's just kind of a terminology for it. It's better than the triangles. Okay. So that's nice. That's all nice and clean now. We have nice quads down there. All right, the next step is that we need some depth on this bowl. So we're actually going to use a new operation we haven't talked about yet. So I'm going to right click and go to edge for this. And what we need to do is pull in a new ring of faces for the top lip of the bowl and then extrude down to make the inside of the bowl. So to extrude, and extrude means making a new ring of edges. So what I'm going to do is click on an edge, and I don't want to do one at a time. I actually want to do all of them at the same time. So what I'm actually going to do is go to the one next to it and double click. By double clicking, I get this entire ring. You see that? It's highlighted orange around the top. Okay. I'm going to extrude this in, which means make a new ring of faces. And you can extrude almost anything. You can extrude faces to make new faces. In this case, we already have a ring of edges, so I'm going to use the edge. All right, so this is located. I'm going to have this selected. There's an edit mesh menu. Now, there's a lot of menus up here that have mesh in it. The first one is mesh, that has to do with the object as a whole. Edit mesh has to do with the components like edges and vertices. Mesh tool is a various mix between the two. It's basically things that didn't fit into either or of these. And then mesh display is again back to the whole mesh as a whole. So we're under edit mesh, okay? And it's near the top here, it's extrude. Okay, I'm gonna hit that button. You're going to get a different tool. Now it's really easy to exit. Don't exit this tool, okay? Careful clicking. Just enter the tool and don't do anything else. You're going to have a few things happen. First, the manipulator is going to look a little different. Over here, the move tool. And then you're going to have this little flyout window, which you can reposition by clicking and dragging. Okay? So you have 2 options right now. You could either, well actually 3. First is that you could start moving this manipulator. Okay? Second is you could adjust these settings here to do it with numbers, or you can enter into the move tool directly with W. Okay. In this case, I'm going to play around with this little pop-up menu. So thickness. See when you hover over any of these words, you get the double-headed arrow. So I'm going to click on thickness and then drag. So that's, if I drag in different directions, the faces go in a different direction. So I want to drag it in. So this is what I want. I'm going to pull it in, not too thick, just a little bit. I have negative 0.2 right now. Okay, so that pulls that edge in. And when I pull that new edge in, it's leaving new faces behind, right? This row wasn't here before. Now they do different things too. So offset, for example, is kind of offsetting from the height. I don't want to change that. If you made any other setting changes, just undo Z. Okay, and that's good. I'm done. I'm going to click out. Okay, so now I have a new ring of faces. And by click out, I mean click in the gray area. Now that gives me the thickness, right? I have now a lip on the bowl, which is good. But now I need to bring the inside of the bowl. So I'm going to go back to edge, and I'm going to grab that new edge and double click. I'm going to get that new inner ring selected. It's highlighted orange right now, the inside ring. And we're going to extrude it again. So I'm going to go up to Edit Mesh, Extrude, and I'm back to the same tool. Now this is going to be slightly different. I'm actually not going to use this. I'm going to go right to move. So I'm going to hit W on my keyboard. Now the tricky thing with this is don't deselect, because right now we actually have two sets of edges in the same spot. So if we were to exit this tool, we're going to leave extra edges behind, which is another kind of very easy common mistake. So just kind of watch out for that. So when you extrude, be very much aware that you have to do something right away. So I'm going to go ahead and move this down so I don't forget. Okay. So again, it's leaving a new ring of faces behind. Now to help me out, it's really hard to see in perspective how thick we're making this bowl. So I'm actually going to use one of the orthographic views. So remember, that's the second button over on the left with the 4 kind of diamonds. And I'm going to use the front or the side. Either one works for this. I'm going to use the front. So to get to the front, remember, you go to the 4, then hover your mouse over the front and hit spacebar. Now no, I still have that edge selected. I never unselected it. Okay, zoom in here. It's still really hard to see. So we actually have other views, right? We have 4 on the keyboard, goes to wireframe. 5 on the keyboard goes back to shaded view. Okay, so 1 is hard edge, 2 is a preview, 3 is smooth, 4 is wireframe, and 5 is shaded. Okay, so I'm going to work on level 1, so it's polygons, hard edges, and I'm going to go to 4, which is wireframe. Now I can see what I'm doing. Now remember, it's perfectly orthographic, so there's no distortion in perspective. So I'm going to go ahead and scale this in from the center. I don't want to scale it from one of the side ones or the top one, because then it will get skewed. I want to keep that round shape. So from the center, I'm going to scale it in. And I actually want to kind of line this up with an edge that's already there. So I'm going to move it down until it touches the edge that's already there. Line it up. And I'm going to scale it in the center until I get a nice consistent thickness over here. Okay, and then extrude again. So edit mesh, extrude. I'm going to go right into my move tool, which is W. Bring it down to the next edge. See how it's sticking out past the bowl? Scale it from the center until you get a nice consistent thickness, which is right around there. One more time down to this edge. So edit mesh, extrude, move tool, W. Bring it straight down onto the next line, scale from the center, bring it in. Now we have to close the bowl off somehow on the bottom, so I'm actually going to extrude it one final time in here. So edit mesh, extrude, move it. I'm not going to move it all the way down, because again we need to keep that thickness. I'm going to kind of cut the difference between where it was and the bottom. I'm going to go kind of right in here, scale it in. So it, again, keeps that thickness. It's right around there, kind of, sounds good. And just leave it like that. Okay, spacebar to go out, spacebar with my mouse in perspective to go back to perspective. And we got what looks like this, which isn't too bad. We are left with a hole, okay? So this is where it's going to get a little bit more complicated, okay? What I'm going to do is we're going to use fill hole operation. So I'm going to go back to object mode for this. So right click object, okay, select it. And now only use fill hole if you only have one spot you want to fill. So in this case, I only have this one area. This sounds good. So I'm going to go ahead and do it. So I'm going to go up to the mesh menu this time. So mesh has to do with the whole object. Find fill hole right here. And just click on it. There's no settings. What it's going to do is put a giant face in the middle of what I had there. So I need to clean this up. I want it to have the same topology, same number of edges as the one on the bottom does. So what I'm going to do is I need to make some new edges to connect these corners. This is actually really bad right now. You can go back to object mode and click. So what's really bad about this is it's one giant face, and we really want faces to only have 4 sides. Okay, this has a lot more than 4. So we have to cut it to make some new edges in here. So the tool to use to do that, and again I'm looking right into the bowl, is going to be actually one of the uncategorized ones, which is mesh tool and insert edge loop tool. Oh, sorry, not that one. Edge loop tool is inserting an edge around a ring, like a new loop. We actually want to draw our own, so we're actually going to go down 2 more from that and use multi-cut. Okay, so sorry about that. Mesh tool, multi-cut, click. You make this little knife icon. It's going to try to snap to these points if you move your mouse around, so don't click quite yet. And you want to connect the ones that are directly across from each other. And you can't just draw to the center and then draw out to other corners. You have to kind of make all the edges, and then we'll go back and delete every other. So I'm going to go up to this one, click when it turns red, and then I'm going to come down to the one below it and click to turn this one. It drops an edge in between, hit enter. I made an edge right there. Do the same thing. Anything that's across from each other, I'm going to connect them. So this one to this one, kind of like a spider web, hit enter, and then click to click, enter. It's good to note that you don't exit the tool every time, you stay in the tool when this happens. Enter, click there, enter. Now I'm done. So to exit the tool, all you gotta do is go back to your move tool with W. Okay, and I'm out of the tool. Okay, so you're just gonna make that kind of spider web pattern, connect everything to everything. And then, just like on the bottom, I'm going to go in and delete every other. So I'm going to go to Edge Mode, every other, 2, 3, 4, 5, and delete. Okay. Perfect. Now if we select the bowl and hit 3, we have a nice solid object with depth here, right? It's not infinitely thin anymore. It's nice. It's nice and smooth, even though we didn't add too many edges, right? The one thing that I do want to change before we stop is the bottom is too round. I want to flatten it a little bit. We're just going to go to edit some vertices to do that, and I'm actually going to go back to my side view. So spacebar to go out, and then pick a view. The front is fine, front or side. Go back in here, and I want to right click on the object and go to Vertex. And remember, 4 and 5 is smoother shaded. Okay, and back to number 1 as well to see what's going on. So on number 1, I see that there's this one point that's kind of too pointy. So I'm going to drag select that little guy, move tool, and move it up to flatten out the base. I'm going to bring it up to that other line. It doesn't have to be perfect, but somewhere in there. Okay, that's the first change. Second, I actually want to flatten the whole bottom in general. So I'm going to drag out a larger selection to get these 1, 2, 3 rows down here. Right, this part of the bowl. And I'm just going to move it up a little bit to, again, flatten it. I'm going to drag some of these as well, the bottom row, and just move that up a little bit as well. And as I do that, remember there's an inner and an outer. This is the outer edge. I need to drag select very carefully to get that inner edge, which is here, and move it up a little bit as well. Okay. Object mode. Now, we did get off of the grid, so while I'm still in this view, back in Object, I'm going to move it down and just eyeball it, like where it touches the ground. Remember, these darker lines are the origin lines, so I'm just going to move it till it's kind of there. Okay, and I want to zero out the position data over here, translate X. We're just off-center a little bit, so I'm going to zero that out, and Z as well, zero that out. Leave Y the way it is. Spacebar to go back. Okay, I think we should be pretty good now. So if I select this bowl and hit 3, it's a little flatter on the bottom, it's not so pointy, and we have the depth, we have everything, it's all good. The only thing we didn't do was name it. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the name of the channel box and say bowl. Very cool. And before I leave here, just also notice in inputs now, there's a lot of things in inputs. This is the history. We made the object, we deleted some things, extruded, tweaked some things, closed a border, which is filling the hole, made some new edges and deleted some more stuff. So again, there's some history going on there. Okay? Very cool. I think in class we have time to make some more complicated objects, but this is kind of the basics of what we're going to be doing, what we have done, because you'll see this after the fact.